Good evening. Welcome to week 9 of the second season of the Pacific Division Sheltering Capacity Building Series. We will have 12 sessions total. Each session will have the same Teams link. This meeting will be recorded and the link will be sent out within a week with slides. All the recordings are also posted on YouTube. You can search for Red Cross Pacific Division on YouTube. Your camera and mic have been disabled. You're able to type your question in the chat and the mic will be open towards the end for Q&As. I encourage you all to type your name and your region in the chat and please say hi to each other. I recognize a few of names and I'm very, very excited to see you all again. My name is Yi-Wei. I am a volunteer. I joined Red Cross in 2009. I am the Los Angeles Region Mass Care Program Lead. And this is a series where I invite all the subject matter experts in mass care or mass care related functions to share their knowledge and to build our workforce confidence. Today we have Amanda with us. She is the Regional Disaster Workforce Engagement Manager in Los Angeles, and she'll be sharing with us what happens after you get assigned to a disaster relief operation. Before we get started, I'd like to provide an operational summary to you all. I know many of you are deployed. I know many of you will be watching the recordings later on because you're currently on deployment. Some of you might just came back from deployment, and some of you just got assigned and you're going on your deployment. We really appreciate the time that you donated to our community and our clients. So we currently have 17 active disaster relief operations across the nation. 3 of them, they're national level operations. That means the projected budget is over $2.5 million and they're level 5s and above. We have 2 level 5 operations. One of them is California for the atmospheric river. Another one is in Missouri and Arkansas for the tornadoes. Then we have 1 level 6, which means the projected budget is more than $5 million. That is in Alabama and Mississippi for the tornadoes. So overnight last night, we had 37 shelters open with 794 populations. So after this session, I really encourage you all to update your availability on Volunteer Connection. That's how our staffing team or deployment team will know to call you and know that you're available to deploy. Now with that, I'm going to turn over to Amanda.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for letting me join your meeting and talk to you a little bit about deployment. I imagine that a lot of you, I don't know a lot of you, but I imagine that a lot of you are seasoned deployers. So you may know this better than I do, but we are definitely wanting to make sure that our workforce understands what the deployment process looks like. So thank you, Yi-Wei, for having me and giving me the platform to be able to talk a little bit. So I have created just a few slides. It's not a huge presentation because I really want to give you all an opportunity to ask your important questions towards the end. So I'm going to do an overview of just the different steps of deployment, what important things you should be thinking about each step of the way, what important documents you need to complete, who you should be communicating with on the DR and outside the DR. And then at the end, I have some frequently asked questions that we'll go over, and then you all can ask anything that I've missed. So please feel free to drop your questions in the chat, and then as we get to the end, we'll address some of those questions individually. So what is deployment? Most of us know what this is, but the simplest version of this is that we are moving Red Cross responders from their home region to a location that is impacted by disaster with the goal of providing care, comfort, compassion, and resources for recovery. We all know what this looks like. You all work in the biggest function of all, which is mass care. So you are doing this every single time you step foot on the ground. So you know what this looks like. You know what this work is. But just an overview, that's what we consider deployment for the Red Cross. Who can deploy? So really anybody can deploy. They do need to be a Red Cross disaster responder unless we're working with local event-based volunteers. But for the purposes of this presentation, we're going to focus on Red Cross responders. So any Red Cross responder who has completed the necessary trainings to achieve a GAP. We all know what a GAP is. That's our group activity position. Some of you are mass care shelter supervisors. Some of you are mass care feeding supervisors, SAs, managers. We've got a whole bunch of different gaps out there. So as long as you have a gap and there's a call for that gap, we can get you out in the field and we can get you doing the work around disaster. So there's 5 steps in the deployment process. It starts with assignment, and then you leave, and then you get there, then you do the work, and then you come home. So we're going to break each one of these down and just talk a little bit about what to expect in each phase of the deployment process. So first we're going to start with assignment. So the things that you need to be thinking about before and while you're working up to the assignment phase is really making sure that all of your information in Volunteer Connection is up to date. So the most important thing that we need to know from you is what your availability is. So going into Volunteer Connection and letting us know that you're available to deploy anywhere in the nation from May the 1st to May the 30th really helps us understand who's available and what pool of volunteers we can pull from to really get out there and address some of the disasters. So that's if that's not something you frequently do, I would encourage you to do that if you have an interest in deploying at all. Next is accommodations. So some people may have access and functional needs that need to be accommodated for in the field. You may have driving needs that need to be accommodated for. You may not be able to drive at night because you have vision limitations. So if there are accommodations that you need to have made for you, there is a section in your your Volunteer Connection profile where you can update this information. And I would encourage you to do that whether you intend to deploy or not. Those are things that your workforce engagement team want to know about so that we can make proper accommodations to meet your needs, whether you're working locally or somewhere else in the country. Next is your emergency contact information. It's really important that we, as your home region, know who to call if there's an emergency while you're in the field. So if that's not something you've updated lately or you've never taken the time to update it, I would highly encourage you to take time to do that. The next piece is really important. So when the operations reach out to staff or to the DWE managers, the workforce engagement managers, and say, hey, we've got these gaps that we need to fill. It's very important that you, number one, have the gap and you've completed the training, right? Those two things go together. So making sure that you've completed the training and make sure that you have the gap added to your profile. So before you get ready to deploy, you may want to check on those things. If you hear that, there might be a call for shelter workers coming up really soon, and you don't know if you have that training up to date, or you don't know if you have that gap, it's a really good idea to reach out to your local program manager or to your workforce engagement manager and just make sure that stuff is updated. Also, as you're getting ready for assignment, it's important. There's a few people you want to make sure you're communicating well with. Your workforce engagement team, let us know if you want to deploy, because if we know that, we're going to put you on our call immediately if there's a disaster list. So we'll look at your responder availability, but if you're somebody who's just like, I'm itching to get out there. I want to get out there. Please put me on your list. I want to go as a shelter worker. Please call me as soon as something comes up. We're keeping track of that, and we're going to call you as soon as an opportunity opens up. The next person or people you want to be talking to is your family. Prepare them for the likelihood that you're going to be gone for up to 14 days. That's a big commitment. And it impacts your family, and it impacts your friends, and it impacts your pets and your kids and all of those things. And so just make sure your family knows what to expect, and make sure that they know that we're going to take good care of you, and that if for some reason something happens while you're in the field, we're going to make sure they're looped in. But be sure and have those conversations with them. And then next is communicating with your employer. If you're somebody who is employed by someone other than yourself, then it's important to just make sure you're communicating clearly with your employer and they know that you're going to be off the job for a couple weeks. We would hate for you to come back and not have your job waiting for you. So, and then the most important thing to do at this point is to say yes when you're called. So you're going to get lots of contact from the workforce engagement team once DRs open. We're going to call you, we're going to text you, we're going to email you. You're going to get really, really tired of us. And it's okay for you to say no. It's always okay for you to say no. You're volunteers, but you're also disaster responders who have decided that you want to do this work. So if we call you and you're available, just say yes, and we'll walk you through the rest of the process. So after you've said yes, it's time to travel. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to book your travel. So one of the things to know is that the primary method of travel for anybody we're sending to a disaster relief operation is by air. It's the least expensive for us, and it makes the most sense when we're flying people across country. There are situations where you may be able to drive, whether it's your personal vehicle or a rented vehicle that Red Cross secures for you. But most travel is going to happen through flying. And if it's not flying, then your deployment recruiter will have a conversation with you about the method of travel. So once you've been assigned, you're going to be told to book your travel. It's very important that you book your travel as quickly as possible because you need to travel within 24 hours unless you've gotten a special accommodation to travel later. So that phone number right there, we've all seen it. We all know what it is. You're going to get that information in an email from your recruiter as well once you're assigned. But that is our travel agency that the Red Cross uses to book flights. They're going to ask you what airport you're leaving from, what airport you're arriving to. They're going to ask you what time of day you want to leave. They're going to ask you all the important questions, and they're going to take care of your travel. You absolutely are not paying for anything when you book this travel. If you go through this link, you're good, or this phone number, you're good. If you decide to go and book an airline ticket some other way, Red Cross does not pay for those airline tickets. So it's really, really important that you follow the instructions necessary to book your travel. The next things that you need to think about as you're getting ready to leave is you need to make sure you pick up your mission card. So once you're assigned, you're going to be assigned a mission card. And on that mission card, we're going to put $450 on it. And that's intended to cover your food and your incidentals while you're deployed. You can pay for your travel to and from the airport. You can pay for, obviously, food. If you forget your toothbrush and your toothpaste, you can use your mission card for that. So you want to make sure that you get that before you leave because you're going to need it once you hit the ground. So before you leave your home region, you've got to get that mission card. And then next, if you're going for an in-person assignment, you're going to have to complete the pre-assignment health questionnaire within 2 hours of assignment. So you're going to get an email from your recruiter that says, please complete this questionnaire. If you don't complete it in that 2-hour window of time, your assignment's going to be stopped and we're going to have to reassign you. So if for some reason you don't think you're going to make that 2 hours, please reach out to your recruiter and let them know so they can adjust your assignment. Also really important is to download the Volunteer Connection app if you haven't already. This is the best way to stay in contact with people back home and with the operation. There's lots of things that are happening within that app that you're only going to have access to if you're assigned to a DR. Things like daily check-ins, things like making requests for lodging, making a request for staff services support. So there are things that app will afford you. So make sure that you've downloaded that app if you feel so inclined. Also, download your assignment record. So your assignment record is going to have all of the information you need about your assignment. It's telling you where you're going, where you're reporting to, so what flight you're taking, what airport you're flying into, where you're going to report once you're on the ground, and it's going to give you some important phone numbers for transportation, staff services, lodging, all of the important phone numbers to answer all the questions that you might have once you get on the ground. So make sure you download that and take that with you, whether it's a digital copy or a hard copy. And then next, really, really important, review the hardship codes. So hardship codes are codes that are assigned, and we'll talk more about this at the end, but hardship codes are assigned to operations to help the workforce understand what adversity they might be facing once they're in the field. It could be things like extreme cold. It could be things like smoky conditions, right? So if you have lung issues or you have, any kind of breathing issues, you might not want to go to an environment where there's a hardship code for smoke. So when you get your assignment record, it'll have the hardship codes on it. Please review the hardship codes and make sure that you understand what those are. And if you can't, for whatever reason, make the hardship codes work, please let us know that, and we'll try to get you someplace where those don't exist, or we may just have to wait until another disaster happens to get you out. And then finally, you need to pack, right? So the advice is to pack light, pack important things, make sure you pay attention to the weather so you're packing appropriately for the kind of clothing that you'll need. If it's wet, you're going to want, reinforced shoes so your feet don't get wet. You're going to want to pack light, and you're not going to want to take dozens and dozens of bags. So pack light. There is a packing list. One of the things that I'm going to have Yue attach to the email that she sends you all with these slides is a list of the hardship codes and the packing list that we recommend for deployment. So if you haven't seen that, there is a packing list that exists that may help. Next, you need to plan for your absence. So make sure that you've arranged care for your home, your pet, your family, your children. Don't leave them out in the cold. Make sure that you have a plan for how they're going to be taken care of, and make sure that you've done everything you need to do at work to ensure your time off is secured. Next, mission card. You can use your mission card while you're traveling to cover food and hygiene supplies, traveling to and from the airport, and even for your baggage fees. A lot of airlines charge for baggage fees $25, $40. Some of them are quite expensive, but you can use your mission card to pay for those. That's what that card is for. All right, so we've gotten you ready for departure. You're on your way, you're traveling, and now you arrive. So,
Amanda, can I have to pause you for a second and ask some questions?
Yeah, absolutely.
So for the baggage fees, how many baggage fees can we charge on that card? Let's say if I bring 4 checked-in baggage, can I charge all 4 to the mission card?
Nope. So you can charge one baggage fee, and it has to be it cannot be an overweight baggage fee. So we all know that if you go over 50 pounds, it's another $50 for that bag. You cannot take overweight. You cannot use your mission card to pay for overweight bags. So you may use one baggage fee, and it has to be a normal sized baggage fee.
Got it. And for the CWT number and also for your volunteer assignment, where would you find that? If I'm a new volunteer that is on there, what section or column can I find that volunteer assignment?
Yep. So on your volunteer connection profile, we all know when you log in, you get that cute little box that has your face in it. So once you've been assigned to an operation, directly under your face, there's going to be a link that says DRO assignment. You click on that link and it's going to pull up your record. And in that record, it's going to have all the phone numbers. It's going to have all your flight information once you've booked travel. It's going to have your reporting location. It's going to have the travel agency number, staff services number, all of the important information that you need.
Thank you so much. Connie, I do see your hand up. Can you go ahead and type in the chat? And we have a question that what happens if you put your availability on the volunteer connection, but you never get a call from your regional or regional deployment team or disaster workforce engagement team? What can you do?
Reach out to them, be proactive. So you can either tell your local program manager, hey, I know that there's deployment happening. I haven't heard from anybody, but I'd like to go. Or reach out to your regional DWE or your regional workforce manager directly and just say, hey, I haven't heard from anybody, but I'm available. Send me. I'd like to go.
Thank you so much. So we do have Michael put in the chat to suggest that, each region is different. different regions might have different preferences. If you were told by the region that, hey, don't contact us, we will pull the list, then follow your region's rule. But, as a division person, I think I would still encourage that if you really wanted to go, it's best to advocate for yourself. Be proactive. Don't wait for someone to call you if you really, really want to deploy. And we'll touch on the door later on, and we'll touch on how many positions we actually currently have open, given that I said we have 17 active operations going on. Okay, Amanda, proceed.
Thank you all. These are really good questions. So most of you who deploy know just how annoying the Red Cross can be with the messaging that we send, but this messaging once you arrive on ground is really important. So you're going to get what are called DRIS messages, which is the Disaster Responder Information Systems. Once you get on the ground, you're going to get text messages that tell you different things like transportation orders. So are you going to pick up a rental car, or are you going to take a shuttle to a hotel, or are you riding with somebody else? So you're going to get that text message once you get on the ground, and then you should follow whatever instructions that text message has for you. You're also going to get your lodging orders. So if you're being sent to a hotel, then they're going to tell you which hotel you're going to go to. If you're going to be sent to a staff shelter, they're going to tell you where that staff shelter is located. So those are two really important pieces of information that you need to hold on to and know how you're going to get where you're going from the airport and where you're going to lodge. You're also going to get your reporting orders. So if you're arriving before 5 p.m., then the expectation is that you go directly to your reporting location and check in with staff services. And then from there, they'll give you further instructions. If you're arriving after 5 p.m., then unless you hear otherwise, the expectation is that you go directly to your lodging accommodations. So you're going to want to make sure you pay attention to those messages as they come in. And if for some reason you land and you turn your phone on and you don't have any of these messages, give it a few minutes, let your phone catch up. But if you don't have any of this information, then that's where you're going to pull out your assignment record and you're going to start making phone calls. You're going to call the transportation number. You're going to call the staff services number and let them know you're at the airport and you don't have any instructions on what to do next. What should you do? That's what those numbers exist for, and they're going to help you get to the next step. So like I already said, before 5 p.m., you're going to go directly to your reporting assignment and check in. If it's after 5, the expectation normally is that you go to lodging unless somebody tells you differently. And then once you check in, whether it's at staff services that day or the next morning, then you're going to wait for your assignment and you're going to wait for your supervisor to contact you with where you should report for your next work assignment. And then important tasks to do in this stage of the process is to let your family know you've arrived. We don't want them to freak out and start calling the region asking where you are. So please let them know you've arrived. And then once you're assigned to the operation, you're going to start getting the incident action plan, which is a very, very important document that details all of the information that's currently happening within the DR. And inside that IAP is the contact info for all the important functions that are attached to the DR. So things like disaster mental health, staff services, transportation, staff relations, all of that stuff is in your IAP. And that's where you can get that information. Okay. Anyway, do we need to stop? I see that there's some stuff in the chat. Do we want to address any of that?
Sure. So I think Cynthia's question, I love how our very, very experienced people are teasing question out that they know the answer, but they want us to answer it so we can better prepare our workforce. So I think you touched gently on that as well, that if you don't fill the pre-deployment health survey, that your assignment within 2 hours, then you don't get assigned, and the staff services team that would have to do the assignment again. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. So what'll happen is you'll get a stop assignment and then we'll have to reassign you. It's not bad. It doesn't look negative on you, but yeah, if you don't do the 2 hours, then we'll stop it and have to reassign you.
And how would you know? Do you get a notification? Let's say you're the staffing person. Will you get a notification that this person didn't complete the survey and you would have to reassign them again?
Yeah, so I'll get an email that says so-and-so did not complete their health survey within the allotted amount of time. Their assignment has been stopped. Please communicate with them about next steps. So we'll reach out to them directly and start the process again and make sure that they have the allotted 2-hour time frame to complete that survey so that we don't have to do it again.
And have you had any instances where that, within the 2 hours that, got lapsed, then the position actually no longer exists? Have you had that happen? And what would you do if that happens?
Absolutely, that can happen. Once, well, that 2-hour window, as long as you're assigned for that 2-hour window, the assumption is that you're taking the position, right? So if that 2 hours lapse and we're not talking to each other to get you reassigned pretty quickly, it's absolutely possible that that position can get taken. So I would, the encouragement is that you do it as quickly as possible. If you end up missing out on the assignment, then we'll just have to wait for more to open up, which inevitably will happen. It may just take another few days before we get you out.
Thank you. And we had a question earlier that, we're talking about packing. And do you really have to pack a sleeping bag for every single operation?
So what I tell my responders is that you should always prepare to sleep. You should always be prepared to sleep in a staff shelter, but hope that you end up in a hotel. And I would say that if the expectation is that you're going to be in a staff shelter, it doesn't hurt to take your sleeping bag. It never hurts to have it, and you can take it as a carry-on. And I would encourage you to take it, but you could always buy one when you get there if that's what you felt like you wanted to do.
Thank you. And we have a question. I think this is pertaining to Hurricane Ian as well, is that how many days is it really realistic to wait for a hotel assignment or lodging, or if you change your assignment that you went to another place, what's the realistic time for expectations?
I don't think there's a standard time frame, right? Things change, situations change. I think it's definitely possible to wait longer than you think you should have to wait. What I would encourage you to do is consistently be reaching out to staff services. Bug them if you have to. If you need to call them on a daily basis and say, hey, I've been here 3 days, I still don't have an assignment, just keep doing that. If you if they're physically located somewhere, go be in front of them and say, I've been here for 3 days, I need an assignment, I would like an assignment. But there are definitely times where people sit for far too long without an assignment. It's just the nature of the beast. But I would highly encourage you to advocate for yourself and definitely put yourself in front of staff services and try to get those assignments made.
So, and I want to add that for any high levels, national level operations, let's say Hurricane Ian or the current operations in Mississippi or Arkansas or any of those operations, we have a lot of people on the ground. For Hurricane Ian, for sheltering function alone, we have over 600 people, and not everyone checked in. So we couldn't give them an assignment, not knowing that they're already there. And because there's a lodging shortage, and that's part of the hardship codes, that knowing that you have a lodging shortage, that means it might take much longer to get lodging, or you might be at a staff shelter, or Hurricane Ian, some people actually slept in the client shelter or in an emergency response vehicle or anything. So those things might happen. And that is also one of the reasons that I invited Amanda to talk about this, because we did one similar session last year regarding this as well. I wanted to bring up this time again because we learned so many lessons from Hurricane Ian, and we really encourage people to be proactive from an operational standpoint, not seeing regions specifically, to talk with the people. If you're assigned to sheltering, go to the headquarters and talk to the sheltering team and say, hey, I haven't got assignment yet. Can I get an assignment? And if I'm the sheltering person in the headquarters, I probably will just, triage you in an interview, ask you a few questions, and might pull you in for, admin support, or I might put you on some, if you come to me directly and when I need support. So there are ways to do that. We really have to be proactive on both sides, from the headquarters side and also from the responder side as well. Okay, Amanda, let's keep going and we'll save the question for later on as well.
Yeah, absolutely. There is one statement in the chat that I'd like to address just really quickly, by M. Pritchard. I can't see what your first name is. I'm sorry, but I want you to understand that the way that I'm presenting this information, I'm trying to be as general as possible, but it definitely does matter what region you're in, right? And so if your region has given you specific orders about how you're expected to interact with them, please, please, please follow that. Don't go back to them and say, well, LA region told me I could do this, because that's not the message we're trying to convey here. Definitely follow the instructions within your region. But if you feel like they're not adequate, maybe start having those really important conversations about you know, different processes to make sure that you're getting what you need as a volunteer to get you out in the field. Okay, so next is your work assignment. So you've been assigned, you've flown, you've arrived, you're checked in, you're ready to go. So now your daily tasks are the most important thing: attend that stand-up meeting. If you're not working in the field somewhere that prohibits you from attending that stand-up meeting, join that stand-up meeting. You're going to get a lot of really good information there. If you're somebody who hasn't been assigned yet, this is a good opportunity for you to make that known in that meeting. You know, staff services may say, hey, if you're here and you don't have an assignment, please drop your name in the chat and we'll get back to you today. So it's a good opportunity to make that known, but it's also just a really good source of information. And then next is you want to complete your daily check-in. So within the Volunteer Connection app, you want to check in. That's going to ask you a couple of really important questions. It's going to say, are you working today? So that check-in, when you answer those questions, it's going to go to staff services. So it's going to ask you, are you working today? If you say no, they're going to ask you why, and you can say, I don't have an assignment. And so staff services gets that information, they pull that information, and they may be able to look at that list and say, oh, we need to get these folks assigned because they don't have an assignment. So they're going to ask you, are you working today? Is your lodging such and such and such and such? Are you working in this gap? And is so and so your supervisor? And as long as you say yes to all of those things, then you're good to go. You've checked in. They know you're there. They know you're working. But if you say no to any of those things and add additional comments, staff services will get back to you to check in about what's not working for you. So once you've done all of that, you're going to check in with your supervisor. You should have gotten your work assignment already. You should know where you're supposed to report and at what time. Please show up on time. Please check in with your supervisor and then get to work. Whatever it is you're doing, whether you're working in a shelter, you're doing feeding, you're doing distribution of supplies, whatever that looks like, make sure that you know where you're supposed to be and get to work and do the work that you came to do. And then if you have any questions or you need any support while you're in the field, your best course of action is to go to your direct supervisor. They should be able to answer your questions. And if not, they have a supervisor and they have a supervisor and they have a supervisor. So the information is there. We just need to access it. Another one that's really important, there's two that I really want to highlight for you all. The first is disaster mental health services. There is disaster mental health services for our clients, but there is also disaster mental health services for our staff, and that is you. And it is important. You are going to see things sometimes on DRs that are emotionally disturbing. You may experience something that is emotionally disturbing to you. There is a 24-hour staff disaster mental health hotline. And if you've finished your shift and you're just really feeling it and you need to talk that out with somebody, please take advantage of that phone call. Please call that hotline. Please talk to that person and see if you can find some sort of way to process what you've experienced on the operation. Disaster health services, obviously, if you get sick or injured, please call DHS and they're going to help you out. Staff services, you're going to call them if you have any problems with your work assignment. If your gap is wrong, if anything if your lodging isn't correct, anything like that's going to go to staff services. Staff relations is a little bit different. It's a relatively new position on DRs, but this is essentially your advocate. These are the people you go to whenever you're frustrated because, something's not going the way that you need it to go in the field, whether it's with your supervisor or one of the people you're working with, or you had a bad experience with somebody in one of the phone calls. No matter what it is, these folks exist to hear your complaints, to hear your issues, and to try to mediate a good resolution so that everybody has a positive deployment experience. So that is one group of people that I would highly encourage you to stay connected to. Sometimes you'll see them wandering around in the field, and they'll ask you things like, how's it going? How do you like working with your supervisor? How do you feel about this assignment? And they're looking to just make sure that you're having a good experience. So don't be afraid to talk to them. A lot of people think of them as the HR police, but they really are your advocate in the field. So definitely take advantage of that. And then also, if you have any issues with transportation, you're going to call the transportation number. All of those numbers are listed in the IAP. So please make sure that you are looking at the IAP daily. I also want to note that if you're doing a 14-day assignment, which is all of our standard assignments, you travel on the first day, you work for 12 days, and you travel on the 14th day. One of those days in that 12-day period is a day off. So you get 1 day off per 12 days. So I want to encourage you, if you have a day off, get away from the operation. Check out. Go, if you have access to a vehicle, go take a drive. If there's something nearby that you're just dying to see, go see it. If there's a restaurant you're dying to try, go try it. Please get away from the operation, step away, clear your head, get yourself grounded, and then come back to the operation ready to complete your assignment.
Amanda, if we can pause and go back to the last slide real quick.
Yeah.
I wanted to touch on, I'm taking Amanda's part away, that I wanted to touch on the daily tasks and also the daily checking, the volunteer connection app. I'm going to use Ian as an experience that, remember, let's say one of our team called you from the shelter side, says, hey, we're going to assign you to shelter ABC. Are you willing to go? And you said yes. And your supervisor is going to be Jane Smith. Then you go on your volunteer connection app and you see that my work location is Hilton Hotel and my reporting location is Hilton Hotel and my supervisor is John Doe. It just simply means that for the activity itself to turn to, it takes time for the activity to turn their assignments to staffing team. So it doesn't happen simultaneously. It's not going to happen the next second. So even if your volunteer connection on the next second or next minute or the whole entire day shows that your work location is different from the assignment that you just got, it does not mean that you're not assigned. It does not mean that you don't have a supervisor. It means that the sheltering team or the function hasn't turned into the list, or the staffing team, hasn't had the time to process yet. And the way we do it, let's say, for example, if we have a high capacity shelter, if I'm sending 30 volunteers in there, I'm going to finish calling all those 30 volunteers. Then I'm going to submit the list to staffing. I'm not going to submit the list after one person. So that might take a little time. And also to remember the difference between the working location, the reporting location, and also the lodging location. They're all different. Sometimes it can be the same. For Hurricane Ian, for headquarters was also the lodging location. It was also my reporting location, so they all stay the same. But for some folks, they might not be the same. And also to remember that checking to the operation doesn't mean to check into the hotel itself alone. It means after you check into the hotel, if you do get hotel accommodation, that you would have to actually to check with the staffing team to in process for the job itself. Okay, Amanda, I'm done. I talked too much.
No worries. Thank you for that clarification, Yue. Yue is definitely a seasoned deployer, so she definitely has some insight that we can all benefit from. So I'm always happy to give the floor to people who have a lot of deployment experience. So, okay. So you've completed your assignment. You've done your 14 days. You feel good because you've done something really good, but you're tired. It's time to go home. So leaving the operation, it's so important that you make sure you check in with your supervisor regarding evaluations. You want to make sure that your supervisors submit your evaluations because that's how you promote to things like manager and chief. And we all have aspirations to do that. Not all of us, some of us do. So really important to make sure that we're asking and reminding our supervisors to submit those evaluations on our behalf. It's important that if you've received any equipment that belongs to the Red Cross, that you turn it back in. If you have a rental car, turn it back in. If you have anything in your possession, laptops, phones, anything in your possession, make sure you turn it back in. Book your travel. You need to book it 24 hours before you leave. So if you know you're leaving at 6 o'clock tomorrow, you should have made your booking by now. Out process with staffing. This is so important. A lot of people will just book their travel and leave because they know they're supposed to leave on a specific day. Please call staffing, call the staffing hotline. All you have to do is call and say, hi, my name is so-and-so. I'm out processing today. They're going to ask you a couple questions, which are really, really important because it pertains to your lodging as well. So they're going to ask you a couple questions. They're going to say, okay, you're going to be out processed. When are you flying? You're going to tell them, and they're going to say, okay, thank you for your service and, safe travels. But make sure you go through that process. Please do not just leave an operation without checking out. And then finally, you can request transportation to the airport. So you can ask the DR to get you there. Somebody can drive you in a rental car, or you can use your mission card to pay for Uber, taxi, rideshare, whatever it is you'd like to do. And then my biggest piece of advice, when you get home, please rest. A lot of us come home and we're ready to dive into local stuff. And we've just worked 2 really, really hard weeks, and now we're ready to just dive back in. Please take a couple days off. Please get some rest, spend some time with your loved ones. If you're somebody who needs, peace and solitude in nature, go do that. Just reground yourself, recenter yourself, because being a disaster responder is really hard work. The work you all do is incredible, and you got to take care of yourself so you can take good care of other people. All right, so those are all the steps. We went through all those steps. There's a couple things that I definitely want a couple of questions that I hear a lot when I'm talking to people. So I want to go through these questions. Maybe you all have them, maybe you don't. And then I'd really like to open it up and see if you all have any questions that I can answer. So the first is, what are hardship codes? We talked about this a little bit. Hardship codes are the things that tell you what you might expect on the operation in terms of adversity. So like I said, I will have UA share with you the hardship code list, so you all have that. That is not a secret. Everybody should have access to that. So we'll get that shared with these slides. Where will I stay on the DR? We talked about this. Expect a staff shelter, but hope for a hotel. So the likelihood is that, we try to do hotels where it's appropriate, but there are definitely times. Ian was one of those situations where there just weren't hotels. And so we had a lot of staff shelters running during Ian. So prepare for a shelter, but hope for a hotel. What if you need more money on your mission card? If you run out of money and you've used your mission card responsibly and you haven't purchased things that you're not supposed to purchase, then on your assignment record, there is an email that you send an email to, and you just let them know that you're out of money and you need to have your mission card refilled. They'll ask you a couple questions and they'll refill your card for you. What do you do if you don't have a work assignment? We talked about this. Make sure you're advocating for yourself. Make sure you're doing those daily check-ins and letting people know you don't have an assignment. Make sure you're popping into those meetings and saying, hey, I'm still sitting here waiting for an assignment. Or go to the headquarters, wherever the staff services team is, wherever the sheltering manager teams are, and let them know you're ready to go and you'd like an assignment. What is a field promotion? So we get this a lot. I've actually gotten a couple calls from my own volunteers lately, surprised because they've gone out as shelter SA, and within a day or two, they're promoted to shelter SV. They don't have any training, but they're doing a really good job as a service associate. And so somebody in the field thought, hey, they'd make a good supervisor. This happens a lot. Most of you know this, right? So it happens a lot. And I think the thing I want you to know more than anything is it's okay for you to say no. If you're not comfortable being a supervisor because you don't have the training, maybe it's your first deployment and you're still getting your feet wet, it is okay to say no. But if you do say yes, it's also okay to embrace that position and know that you do have people that you can ask questions of. You're always going to have your supervisor, you're going to have their supervisor, and you can talk to other supervisors who are on the operation to just kind of get tips and tricks. You can also ask for a mentor if you feel like that's something that you need. How much do you have to pay to deploy? I get this question a lot. I can't deploy because I don't have the money to pay for deployment. You don't have to pay for deployment. You don't pay for travel. You don't pay for your incidentals while you're there. The only thing you would have to pay for are expenses that are not part of the allowable expenses for mission cards. So we will pay for your flight to and from. We will pay for your food while you're there. We will pay for any of your incidentals while you're there. So you do not have to spend any money to deploy unless you want to buy souvenirs or some extravagant thing that you see while you're deployed. Will my assignment stay the same or could it change? It could change. How many of you have had an assignment that has changed within a day or two of getting there? You might deploy as a shelter service associate, and they might really need disaster assessment folks, and you have the gap, and they're coming for you. So your assignments can absolutely change. Don't be surprised if somebody asks you to do something that you didn't actually deploy to do. You can say no. You can say no, absolutely, but it is not outside the realm of possibility that that could happen. A couple more questions, and then I'll let you all ask some questions. Can I drive myself to a DR instead of fly? The traditional answer to this is no. There is a mileage limit on how many miles from the home region to the disaster area that somebody can fly. Most people are going or drive. Most people are going to fly. If you're driving, it has to be less than 250 miles, and the DR has to approve that it's okay for you to drive. So there's always approvals that have to happen to make it so that you can drive. How long does a deployment last? For most deployments, they're 14 days. That's 2 travel days and 12 work days. For DHS and DMH, so disaster mental health and disaster health services, their assignments are 10 days. So they have 2 travel days and 8 work days. And then the last question is, what if I want to stay longer? You're welcome to extend your time if that's something that you want to do. You just let your supervisor know, let staff services know, and they'll take care of extending your assignment, making sure you continue to have all the things you need, including lodging. So those are all the common questions that I hear as I deploy people. So now, Yue, I'm going to have you have your folks ask some questions.
Great, Amanda. Thank you. Before we ask questions, I'm afraid people are going to leave, so I'm going to say it. Next week, same time, same channel, same Teams link, 6 o'clock Pacific time, Pacific Daylight Saving Times, and we're going to talk about children in disaster shelters. So that will be another fun topic as well. So let's go to questions. We have a lot of good questions. One of the questions I really liked, I think there are 2 components to it, is if I'm on a standby team, does it count towards my 14 days or do I get a day off? I think there are 2 components to it. One is that if you're on a standby on the local team, you haven't, out process, not shouldn't say out process, you haven't left your local regions. And the other 2 is that you checked into the job. It's not a standby team that you are in process and you're on a standby team. So Amanda, what do you think? And do they get a days off or does it count towards their deployments?
Yeah, so if you've been in processed and you're on the operation, then yes, your first day is considered your travel day. You have the 12 work days, you have the 1 day travel back, right? So if you're in processed, you are considered on the job and your days start counting as soon as you start that assignment. If you're not in process, you're just like right now we have standby lists for people who we're putting into positions through April the 10th, and they may deploy within the next week to somewhere in the United States. That does not count, right? So that does not count towards your work days. That does not count until you're on the ground. That's when we start counting days.
Thank you so much. I love the
Uh-huh.
answer. Another one is that also related to the days is that let's say that I don't have assignments. Hurricane Ian, let's just use Hurricane Ian for everything now. That Hurricane Ian that I got there, I waited for 5 days. I don't have assignments. And on the sixth day, I got an assignment. When does my first rest? Like when can I take a break?
I'm sorry, say that one more time. You cut out there for a minute.
When can I take a break if I didn't get assigned? I was in the hotel for 5 days for the initial 5 days, but
Mhm.
I started working on the sixth day. When can I take a break?
That's a good question. That's a question to ask the supervisor, right? So I think the idea might be that, well, you've had 5 days not working, and so like we need you to work a few days before you take some time off. But that's something that I think you can talk to your supervisor about and negotiate. I think that's going to be a case by case basis. I don't think there's a blanket like process answer to that question.
Thank you. And I would say the same, that talk with your supervisor and it really depending on case by case basis as well. If you really didn't do anything during the 5 days, you were just waiting and you're really ready to go, then I would say probably, talk with your supervisor and schedule the day off. But if you're already really, really exhausted, you were even in the hotels probably, but you were assisting the headquarters or not, then maybe you want to take the off day sooner. And we do have other questions as in, are you allowed to fly home a few days after you finish the DR at your own expenses or covered by the disaster relief operation?
So I'm gonna be honest. I don't have a lot of experience with that one. I would say, and we might need to do a little more digging, and maybe where we can answer this question when you send out your email. But my assumption would be that we would still pay for your flight home, but only if you're going home, right? So if you're flying somewhere else, then you would need to pay for your own flight to somewhere else. But if you're staying in the area, we would still pay for your flight home. You just need to check out of our lodging and find your own lodging accommodations. That is what I believe the policy is. But like I said, I will connect with you. I will get the policy on that and we'll get that sent out to you guys in the email.
Right. And from my perspective, what I understood was that if there's any changes to your flight, or if, let's say you want to extend or whatnot, you would have to get the DR's approval. It's not just saying that, oh, I want to leave, let's say you check out or you're out process on a Monday and you want to fly home on a Friday, you would have to get the disaster relief operations approval before you can book the flight on Friday. Because once you out process, you can no longer book flights. I believe after a day, you can no longer book flights. And we have a question that, let's say I don't like my current assignment and I want to switch assignment. Can I just go ahead and blindly and say, yes, I want to, switch to this without talking with anyone?
Absolutely not. You always need to talk to your supervisor, and you need to talk to the supervisor of the position that you want to go into. So sometimes you'll be approached by another supervisor and they might say, "Hey, we really want you to come over to DA. We know you're doing sheltering, but we'd really like you to come to DA." It's okay for them to ask you that, but you still need to check with your supervisor. You need to make sure that approval is given on both sides and that your supervisor is okay with that. When you're assigned to a supervisor, that person is your decision maker. So you need to run any decisions that have to do with your current work assignment by them before you make any decisions yourself.
And I also want to emphasize that as a service associate, you go to a supervisor. As a supervisor, you are going to go to the headquarters manager to ask for approval because a field supervisor does not have the authority or approval level to switch someone to another function. So DA's damage assessment, they don't have the authority. So the DA, the disaster, another function has to accept the assignment for another incoming worker. And also the current assignment supervisor, which is the headquarters manager, needs to release that person. And both of them, they have to sign papers. Without that, we cannot process you. And that what happened in Ian was that one day I was in sheltering and I lost 40 people to another function because the other functions person was out in the field, a supervisor, and he was asking people around to see if they got assignment or not. They didn't at the moment, which I was going to have my team to call them in 5 minutes. Then they grabbed them all. And when my team called them, they were all went to another function. And at just, within a few minutes, I lost 40 people. So that's something that we don't want to happen. We don't want to happen in any activities, not just sheltering, but in any activities, we wouldn't want that to happen. Okay, so we have another question regarding evaluations that, we don't have evaluations because we didn't get the correct assignment or we didn't get the correct supervisor. What can we do?
So if you're missing an assignment, there is an email that you can send an email to, and you can say, hey, I did this thing. This was my supervisor. I never got an evaluation. And there's a team that will follow up with those supervisors to make sure that your evaluations get completed. I believe somebody dropped it in the chat already. I will find it and I will repost it. But yeah, if you're missing an evaluation, there is a process for requesting that your supervisors go back and complete your evaluations.
Right. So I posted in the chat, this applies to Pacific Division only. When I say apply to Pacific Division only, meaning that the Pacific Division responders, I know some of you are from, across the country. So for Pacific, we do have a policy that doesn't matter where we're deployed to. If you didn't get an evaluation, so you're entitled to get an evaluation if you deploy for more than 7 days. And if it's less than 7 days, but more than 3 days, you can request for evaluation. So if you believe that you need an evaluation, but you didn't get it, you are able to use that link. It will ask you some questions as you do remember the DR number, when you were deployed, if there's any information, and Susan Wananan touched on for the previous sessions. Then it goes to the division staffing team or disaster workforce engagement team, and they will track down for you. So that applies to Pacific Division only. But for all other divisions across the region across the nation, there's other processes. And you can, of course, if you know that person's name, or if you look back to the IAP, Incident Action Plan, if you find out who that person is, or probably the top list, the list only gives you the manager's level or headquarters people, you're able to contact them or contact the staffing team to see if you can get an evaluation. Okay, so we have another question. What if you had 2 supervisors during the deployment?
So it's usually the supervisor that's had you the longest that'll do your evaluation. Sometimes they'll both do it. If you want both evaluations, you can ask for that. Even if it's less than the mandatory amount of time, if you feel like you had a really good experience with that supervisor and you really want them to give you an evaluation, it is okay for you to ask that supervisor to complete an evaluation for you. You should always be tracking with your supervisors before you leave the operation to make sure that they know that you want an evaluation.
And we have another good question. We talked about earlier the standby team, and the standby team, we do have a DR, the 222 DR. So what if you were on standby for that DR and you didn't get an evaluation?
So you're not going to get an evaluation for standby because you don't have an assigned supervisor. So if you don't have a work assignment and you don't have a supervisor, you're not going to get an evaluation.
So Connie, that's what we meant earlier by when you're on standby team, does your date counts or not? That we broke down into 2 scenarios. One is that you're home standing by versus you're at the job, checked in process for the job, and you're standing by. One, if you're at home, then you're not on the job. You're just standing by at home. When you're on the job, you're actually working. That counts towards your working days. Do we have any other questions, or does anyone has any questions that you want to raise your hand for? I realize that I didn't get the chance to unmute everyone yet. We have 4 minutes left. I've now just opened the mic. Michael, do you have a question, or does your dog have a question?
No. Well, his question is, where's dinner?
Aww.
5 minutes.
And Seth, do you have a question?
Sorry, no. Oh, I didn't realize I was unmuted.
Okay, perfect. So I don't see any other questions. Amanda, one thing I'd like to ask presenters is if there were 1 tip or 2 tips that you can give to any people that just, whether it's new or seasoned volunteers for your specific topic that you presented, what would it be?
You guys hear this all the time. You all hear this all the time, but I'm going to say it again. It's especially important when you're deploying is to be flexible and to be adaptable. We sent some folks to Jackson, Mississippi a couple days ago. They got stuck in 3 different airports across 2 different days before they got to where they're going. And the process was made so much easier because they just had a positive attitude about it's okay, we'll get there eventually, right? And I know that feels counterproductive to what we're doing, but sometimes we can't control everything. And so my encouragement is just please be flexible, be kind to the people you're interacting with, because I guarantee you, if you're having a problem, there's 50 other people having the same problem, and staff services is taking the brunt of it. So please just be kind to the people that you talk to. I would definitely recommend leading with curiosity rather than making assumptions about people's intentions. So try not to get angry with people before you truly understand what's going on. Ask questions. Ask things like, am I the only person experiencing this? How can I help? Is there something I can do to make this process easier? So be flexible, be adaptable, be kind to people. There's just too many people coming back and talking about their experience of just being mistreated on operations, and that's not a cool way to be representative of the Red Cross.
Thank you, Amanda. And I just also want to add that thank you so much for attending, and also give yourself grace as well. I really liked the IAP, the Incident Action Plan from the DEER 176, the current DEER going on in Northern California, that give ourselves grace, and also that give kudos to other people as well. Sometimes your small kindness really makes a big difference in people's lives, especially when you're deployed, especially when you're meeting people that you don't know. So thank you all very much for attending. I am so happy, even with the 17 DRs across the nation, we still had more than 100 people attending. Thank you all so very much. I will see you all next week. Thank you. Good night.